up. I am particularly concerned with the fact that we as a nation are pontificating about global corruption when it's clear that we have inherent local corruption. When I say local, I mean national corruption. And in a sense, it's brilliant timing with the evidence that Dominic Cummings has been giving today. I haven't heard all of it, and it does seem to be that he's talking more about incompetence than corruption. But obviously, we can look at that after this debate. So it does seem a strange piece of legislation to be coming through this House while details are still being released about the government's VIP lane contracts to friends of ministers and dubious funding of the Prime Minister's living arrangements. These are global anti-corruption sanctions, which the explanatory memorandum says are to prevent and combat serious corruption. Now, I've got the same queries as the Noble Lord Anderson of Swansea and the Noble Lord Garnier, and I think Noble Lady Baroness Wheatcroft mentioned it as well, the definition of serious. So that's going to be something we're obviously going to be hoping the Minister can be helpful on. So it helpfully defines corruption as bribery or misappropriation of property. Well, that's very useful, but it's perhaps something that we see a constant stream of in our media about our government. And so perhaps we should be thinking about how to sort that out as well. And also, of course, those were the right words to be using, not the desensitised word sleaze, which we see more associated with corrupt behaviour from the British elite. The word sleaze is to corruption as the word expat is to immigrant. So the word sleaze and expat, they're sort of slightly acceptable, they're not very worrying, whereas corruption and immigrant are something that Brits don't do. And therefore we can all take the moral high ground, which of course is complete nonsense. It's what allows the government to claim, as they do in the explanatory memorandum, that Her Majesty's government is committed to tackling serious corruption, upholding good governance and the rule of law, and promoting open societies. This is clearly not true when you look at what they're doing in Britain at the moment. And to recognise that serious corruption has a range of corrosive effects on states, markets, societies, and wherever it occurs. It's occurring here in Britain, and it will have a corrosive effect, as this says, on states, markets, and societies. And this sort of double-speak actually leads to double-think. The same ministers who've been behind VIP contracts to their donors and friends, sleazy behaviour at best, can see themselves as anti-corruption heroes, taking on all the other countries, doing exactly the same thing as we're doing here, but we label it corruption for them. So domestic law really ought to be dealing with this here, and it clearly isn't. And perhaps the Noble Lord Minister could tell us why that's not happening here in Britain. Sleaze becomes just a public reputational thing, public relations to be dealt with by press officers, spin doctors, and a couple of ministers perhaps going on the Sunday shows, news shows, repeating buzzwords. Corruption is a serious issue, and we really ought to be serious about it. The double standard, the way we think about ourselves as being free of corruption, it's just a bit of sleaze, and yet how we see other nations indulging in corruption, this is unacceptable. Corruption is corruption, whether it's here in the UK by our ministers, as much as it is anywhere else by some sort of awful regime. So, personally, I look forward to all corrupt politicians facing justice for their misappropriation of public resources and their corrosive effects on public life and the corrosive effect on our respect for democracy.